Imagine a fragile kitten, trembling in the cold, abandoned with no hope of survival. Now picture a baby lion cub, mighty yet broken, longing for a family it had lost. Their worlds couldn't be more different, yet fate had something extraordinary in store. This is the story of how a stray kitten and a lonely lion cub found each other, forming a bond so unique and heartwarming it would change both their lives forever. It started on a rainy evening in the heart of a bustling city. The kitten, no more than a few weeks old, huddled behind an old crate. Its fur was soaked, and its tiny meows were barely audible over the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement. This little one had been abandoned in a cardboard box, left to fend for itself in a world that seemed too harsh to care. Miles away, at a wildlife sanctuary, the story of another young life was unfolding. A baby lion cub named Leo had recently been rescued from an illegal breeder. The cub had been taken from his mother far too early, leaving him scared, lonely, and unsure of his place in the world. The sanctuary staff did their best to care for him, but no amount of food or comfort seemed to fill the void left by the absence of a companion. Back in the city, fate was setting the stage for a life-changing moment. A compassionate woman named Mia, who had spent years rescuing animals, was walking home after a long day at the local shelter. The faint cries of the kitten stopped her in her tracks. Following the sound, she found the tiny creature shivering in the cold. One look at its frightened eyes, and Mia knew she couldn't walk away. She wrapped the kitten in her scarf and whispered softly, "Don't worry, little one. I'll take care of you now." What Mia didn't know was that this small act of kindness would lead her on an incredible journey, one that would connect this fragile kitten with a lion cub in need of a friend, and change their lives forever. Mia was a person who had always felt a deep connection to animals. From a young age, she'd been the one to bring home stray dogs, injured birds, and even the occasional squirrel in need of care. Her small apartment in the city was a sanctuary of sorts, filled with plants, soft lighting, and pictures of the many animals she'd rescued over the years. It wasn't just a hobby for Mia, it was her calling. Her passion for animals stemmed from her own experiences of feeling lost and out of place as a child. Growing up in a foster system, Mia had longed for stability, for someone to care about her unconditionally. When she couldn't find that in people, she found it in animals. Their silent loyalty and unspoken understanding filled a void in her heart. Now, as an adult, Mia spent her free time volunteering at local shelters and wildlife sanctuaries. She wasn't wealthy, but she poured every spare moment and dollar into her mission to help as many creatures as she could. It was during one of her regular evening walks home that she found Lily, the tiny kitten who had been left to fend for itself in the cold. When Mia first laid eyes on Lily, something stirred deep within her. The kitten's frail body and pleading eyes struck a chord, reminding her of the baby lion cub she had met weeks ago at the sanctuary. Leo had the same look, wide, searching eyes filled with fear and a quiet hope for kindness. It was as if the universe was placing these two fragile lives in her path for a reason. Carrying Lily home that night, Mia couldn't help but think back to her visit to the sanctuary. She remembered how Leo had been curled up in the corner of his enclosure, his tiny body dwarfed by the space around him. He had looked so small, so unsure of his surroundings, as if he didn't quite belong. Mia had crouched down by the fence, calling softly to him, and for a moment, their eyes met. It was a fleeting connection, but it had stayed with her, lingering in her thoughts long after she left. Now, sitting on her couch with Lily wrapped in a warm blanket, Mia began to wonder if there was a way to bring these two lives together. The idea seemed ridiculous at first, a kitten and a lion cub, but something about it felt right. Both Lily and Leo had been abandoned, left to navigate a world that had been anything but kind to them. Maybe, just maybe, they could find the family they needed in each other. As Lily let out a soft purr and snuggled closer, Mia felt a spark of hope. She didn't know how, but she was determined to make it work. For now, all she could do was take things one step at a time, starting with giving Lily the love and care she deserved. As days turned into weeks, Mia began to see the challenges of her decision. Lily, while small and fragile, showed signs of resilience. But it wasn't without struggle. She had a persistent cough and refused to eat much, her tiny body trembling even under the warmest blankets. Every meow felt like a cry for help, tugging at Mia's heart in ways she hadn't expected. She spent sleepless nights researching kitten care, anxiously watching over Lily as she drifted in and out of fitful sleep. But it wasn't just Lily's condition that kept Mia on edge. Leo's situation at the sanctuary weighed heavily on her mind. News from the staff was bleak. The sanctuary was overburdened, and the resources to care for a growing lion cub were stretched thin. Despite their best efforts, Leo seemed to be growing more withdrawn. A call from one of the caregivers confirmed Mia's worst fears. If a solution wasn't found soon, they might have to relocate him to a facility far away, where his future would be uncertain at best. Mia's apartment began to feel like a battleground of emotions. On one hand, she felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility for Lily. Each small step in her recovery was a victory: her first full meal, her hesitant attempts to play with a dangling string. But those moments of joy were fleeting, overshadowed by Mia's growing doubt. Could she really handle two animals, especially one as complex as a lion cub? Her mind raced with questions that had no easy answers. What if Leo and Lily didn't bond? What if the risk was too great, and she ended up failing them both? She spent hours pacing her living room, torn between the life she wanted to offer them and the harsh realities of their circumstances. One evening, as Mia sat by her window, Lily curled up on her lap. A notification lit up her phone. It was an email from the sanctuary, a picture of Leo accompanied by a short note. "He hasn't eaten much today. We're worried he's giving up." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Mia stared at the screen, her mind flashing back to the first time she had met Leo, his timid eyes silently pleading for a chance at life. She looked down at Lily, now purring softly, and felt the weight of her indecision pressing down harder than ever. That night, Mia dreamed of a house filled with light and warmth, where a tiny kitten and a young lion cub played together, their laughter-like sounds filling the air. But as she reached out to touch them, they faded away, leaving her alone in the darkness. She woke up with a start, her heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. The clock was ticking, and Mia knew she had to make a decision. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure of it all felt suffocating. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small voice whispered, "They need you." Mia sat on the floor of her apartment, the glow of the city lights casting faint shadows across the room. Lily was nestled in her lap, her soft purring the only sound breaking the stillness. But Mia's mind wasn't quiet. It raced with thoughts of Leo. His image, his sad, tired eyes, haunted her. The email from the sanctuary replayed in her head like a broken record. "He isn't eating. We're worried he's giving up." She looked down at Lily, whose tiny body seemed stronger now than the day she found her. A wave of determination swept through her. "If she can fight this hard to live," Mia whispered to herself, "then so can I. And so can Leo." Without hesitation, Mia grabbed her laptop and opened the sanctuary's website. Her fingers trembled as she typed out a heartfelt email to the director, explaining her decision to take Leo, Indiana. Every word felt like a promise, not just to the lion cub but to herself. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this work," she typed. "Please, let me give him a chance." The next morning, Mia's alarm blared before sunrise. She hadn't slept much, but the adrenaline coursing through her veins made her feel alive. She spent the early hours rearranging her apartment, creating a safe, cozy space for Leo to transition into his new life. Pillows and blankets lined the corners of the room, and she even placed Lily's favorite toy mouse near the makeshift bed. A few hours later, her phone buzzed. It was a call from the sanctuary. Mia answered with bated breath, her heart pounding as the director's voice came through. "We got your email," they said, "and we can see how much you care. If you're sure about this, we'll make the arrangements." Mia's breath hitched. "Yes," she replied, her voice firm. "I'm sure. I want to bring him home." The paperwork was ready by the time Mia arrived at the sanctuary that afternoon. She sat in the small office, signing document after document. With each pen stroke, her resolve grew stronger. When the director handed her the final form, they looked her in the eye and said, "This is a big commitment. But something tells me you're the right person for him." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she nodded. "I won't let him down," she promised. As the staff prepared Leo for his journey, Mia stood by the window of the sanctuary, watching the animals in their enclosures. She thought about how far she'd come, from a hesitant adopter to someone ready to take on a challenge as big as this. When Leo finally appeared, guided gently by two caregivers, her heart swelled. He looked frail but curious, his wide eyes scanning the room before landing on her. "It's going to be okay," Mia whispered as she knelt down to meet his gaze. "You're coming home." With Leo safely in the carrier, Mia placed him in the back seat of her car, glancing back every few minutes during the drive. Lily, waiting at home, had no idea her family was about to grow. As the car pulled into her building's driveway, Mia felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known before. This was it, the beginning of something extraordinary. Mia could feel the tension in her shoulders ease as she carefully lifted Leo out of the carrier. His eyes were wide with curiosity, but there was something else, something deeper. He was scared. She could feel it in his trembling little body, yet he didn't resist. He seemed to sense that he was safe now. For the first time, Mia allowed herself to breathe. "It's okay, Leo," she whispered, her voice soft as she gently stroked the side of his face. The apartment felt overwhelmingly large to the little cub. As Mia set him down on the soft blankets in his new space, he hesitated. His wide eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of danger. Mia sat on the floor, a few feet away, her hands resting in her lap, not wanting to crowd him. She wasn't sure how long it would take for him to feel truly safe, but she knew this was the first step. Minutes passed in silence. Leo, still wary, finally took a few hesitant steps toward the pile of plush cushions and toys Mia had arranged. She watched quietly, her heart swelling with hope. Then, just as she thought he might retreat back into the corner, something miraculous happened. Leo looked back at her, his eyes softer now. Slowly, cautiously, he approached her. Mia held her breath as he nuzzled her hand. His fur was so soft, a small sign of the warmth he was beginning to feel. "You're okay, Leo," she whispered. He nudged her hand again, this time with more confidence, and Mia couldn't help but smile. In that moment, she knew they had taken their first step toward healing together. As the days passed, Leo's behavior began to shift in small but significant ways. At first, he would hide whenever Mia reached out to touch him. But over time, his little tail would wag whenever he saw her coming. One afternoon, Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, playing with a squeaky toy. Leo, who had been quietly watching from the corner, suddenly pounced. The sound of his tiny paws echoing across the hardwood floor made Mia's heart leap. It was the first time she had seen him so playful. She laughed softly, clapping her hands in delight as Leo pounced on the toy again, then batted it across the room with a small growl. He was still tentative, unsure of what he was doing, but it was a sign, a beautiful sign, that he was starting to trust. One evening, Mia sat on the couch, reading a book when she felt a soft nudge at her feet. She looked down, startled, and found Leo sitting by her side, his large golden eyes filled with a quiet plea. "You want to sit with me?" she asked gently, unsure if he was ready. To her surprise, he curled up at her feet, his head resting on her lap. The touch of his fur against her skin felt like a promise. Leo had come to understand that this space was his home, and that Mia wasn't someone to fear. She gently stroked his back, feeling the slight shudder of his muscles relaxing under her hand. For a moment, everything felt right. But the progress wasn't always linear. There were moments when Leo would retreat to his corner, his body tense, eyes wide with fear. Mia could see the shadow of his past in those moments, the uncertainty, the hurt, the confusion. But she never gave up on him. She patiently waited, offering him her presence without overwhelming him. And slowly, but surely, the moments of retreat became fewer. One day, Leo ventured out of his corner and took a few tentative steps toward Mia, who was sitting on the floor playing with one of his toys. With a soft, almost imperceptible whine, Leo placed the toy at her feet. It was his way of saying he was ready to play. Mia smiled, her heart full as she reached down to gently take the toy from him. The more time they spent together, the more Leo's personality began to shine through. The timid cub who had arrived with uncertainty in his eyes was slowly becoming a playful, affectionate lion. Mia could see the change in him. His eyes sparkled with curiosity, his steps became bolder, and his growls turned into playful roars when they chased toys around the apartment together. Mia laughed as Leo bounded around the room, her voice full of joy. "You're getting stronger," she said, her eyes shining with pride. She had been worried about how long it would take for him to heal, but now she could see the progress clearly. Every small change felt like a victory. Leo nuzzling her hand, accepting affection, playing, and even following her around the apartment like a tiny shadow. He was no longer just a frightened animal trying to survive. He was a beloved companion, a creature learning to trust, to love, and to thrive in a home filled with care. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Mia and Leo deepened. Mia could see how much he had transformed, how much they had both transformed. She wasn't just healing him, he was healing her too. Each moment, every little triumph, felt like a reminder of the incredible journey they had taken together. And Mia couldn't wait to see where this journey would take them next. Mia had always known that one day, Leo would come around. The journey had been long, filled with moments of doubt, but she never gave up. Today, as she sat on her bed, the warmth of the late afternoon sun casting a gentle glow over the room, she felt something in the air. It was different. Something had shifted between her and Leo. The little kitten had been through so much. The abandoned alleyway, the fear, the hunger, it had all left its marks. But now, here in the comfort of her home, in the safety of her arms, Leo was beginning to heal. Mia closed her book and looked up, a smile spreading across her face when she saw Leo standing by the door. He was no longer the fearful, trembling creature she had first rescued. Today, there was a new spark in his eyes, one of curiosity, of hope. She could see that the bond they had been building was finally taking shape. "Come here, Leo," Mia said softly, her voice a gentle whisper. It was a command, but one that was filled with warmth and invitation. She patted the space next to her on the bed, her heart racing with anticipation. Would he come to her this time? Would he trust her enough? Leo hesitated for a brief moment, his small body tense, but then something changed. He took a step forward, then another. And soon, with the quietest of meows, he was standing beside her, his eyes never leaving hers. The connection between them had always been strong, but now it felt like something more, a deep understanding, a promise. "Good boy," Mia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She reached out slowly, gently pulling Leo onto the bed. He didn't flinch, didn't shy away. He sat there beside her for a moment, his tiny form still unsure but slowly letting go of the last remnants of fear. Mia could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. The moment when Leo finally realized that he was safe, that she would never hurt him. As if to seal their connection, Leo curled up beside her, tucking himself into the soft fabric of her sweater. He rested his head on her lap and let out a quiet purr, something Mia hadn't heard from him in days. It was the sound of contentment, of trust. It was the sound of home. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she stroked his soft fur. She couldn't believe how far they had come. The kitten who had been terrified of human contact was now lying comfortably beside her, purring in peaceful surrender. In that moment, she knew, deep in her heart, that their journey together was only just beginning. "I'm here, Leo," Mia whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "You're safe now. You're home." Leo lifted his head slightly, his little eyes locking with hers. He reached out with a tiny paw, gently tapping her hand, as if to say, "Thank you." The bond between them had been forged in the fires of fear and uncertainty, but now it was unbreakable. In that moment, they were a family. Mia couldn't stop the tears from falling. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief, of love. She had saved Leo, but in so many ways, Leo had saved her, too. The quiet comfort of their shared space, the trust that had been built with time, filled her with a profound sense of fulfillment. This was what it meant to be a rescuer, to offer a new life, and in return, find the most unexpected of rewards, an unwavering love that was worth every challenge faced along the way. Mia sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling as she reached for the blanket. The soft, golden light from the late afternoon sun streamed through the window, bathing the room in warmth. It was a peaceful evening, but there was something in the air that felt different today. She could sense it, the moment of change. Across the room, Leo sat on the windowsill, staring out at the garden. His fur glistened in the light, but his eyes, so full of uncertainty just weeks ago, now held a flicker of something more, a spark of trust, of hope. Mia's heart swelled as she watched him. How far he had come from the terrified kitten she'd first brought home from the shelter. "Come here, Leo," she called softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo turned his head slightly, his golden eyes meeting hers. There was hesitation, a small flicker of doubt in his gaze. Mia knew that the past had left its scars. Leo had learned to fear, to be cautious of humans. But as she watched him, she also saw something she hadn't seen before, the will to trust. For a long moment, he stayed where he was. But then, as if making a quiet decision, he jumped down from the windowsill. His tiny paws padded softly across the room, each step filled with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. Mia held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had waited for this moment for so long. As he neared the bed, Mia reached out, slowly and cautiously, her palm resting on the blanket beside her. The room was silent except for the soft sound of Leo's breath. She didn't want to scare him. She wanted him to come to her, to trust her without fear. Leo stopped at the edge of the bed, his body tense. Mia gave him a soft, reassuring smile. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe." Then, in a moment that felt both delicate and profound, Leo stepped forward. His small body moved closer to her, inch by inch. And just as she had hoped, Leo curled up beside her on the bed, his head resting against her thigh. He let out a tiny, contented purr, something Mia hadn't heard from him in weeks. Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she gently stroked his fur. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when Leo truly understood he was loved, that he was no longer alone in the world. The kitten who had once cowered at every sound was now trusting enough to rest in her arms. "I'm here, Leo," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now." For a moment, Leo lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers with an unspoken understanding. It was as if he was saying, "Thank you." Mia's heart overflowed with love, relief, and joy. She had saved him from a life of fear and uncertainty, and in return, he had saved her from loneliness. Together, they were healing, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. This was what love felt like, the quiet comfort of knowing someone was there for you, always. And in that moment, Mia knew. Leo was home. They were home. The warmth of the afternoon sun filled the living room as Leo sat by the window, his small frame bathed in golden light. The sound of birds chirping outside seemed to be a distant, pleasant hum, barely noticeable now that his life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. It was hard to believe that just months ago, he had been a fearful kitten, abandoned and alone, struggling to trust even the gentlest of hands. Mia watched him from the couch, a smile tugging at her lips as she observed his transformation. Leo had grown from a nervous, shy creature into a confident little cat who claimed his space in her home with pride. His coat had become thick and soft, and his once timid gaze was now filled with curiosity and wonder. One evening, as Mia was reading a book on the couch, Leo jumped up beside her, the quiet click of his paws on the cushion a familiar sound. He nuzzled his head into her side, his purring so loud it almost felt like the whole room vibrated. Mia chuckled softly, lifting her hand to scratch behind his ears. In this moment, it was clear. Their bond was unbreakable. He had gone from hiding under the bed at the sound of footsteps to seeking out her touch, curling up beside her as if he knew this was his safe place. His trust in her was a gift she'd worked hard for, a trust she now treasured more than anything. Mia sighed contentedly, leaning back into the cushions. She couldn't help but reflect on their journey. The sleepless nights spent worrying about Leo's health, the struggles of coaxing him out of his shell, and the challenges of teaching him to trust again. Those moments now felt distant, like the fading echoes of a past she no longer needed to remember. Her life had changed in ways she hadn't expected. Leo wasn't just a pet, he was family. She watched him snuggle deeper into her lap, his small body rising and falling with each steady breath, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had brought so much love into her life, and she had done the same for him. As the day slipped into evening, Mia stood up and moved to the kitchen. Leo followed, his tail swishing happily behind him. It was a small thing, but it meant the world to her. His unwavering companionship, his joy in simply being near her. Mia stopped and turned to look at him, her heart full. "You're safe now, Leo," she whispered, knowing that the words had finally come true. "You're home." In that moment, the world felt perfectly still. The love they had built, slowly but surely, had become their foundation. Leo wasn't the scared kitten she had met that day. He was a confident, joyful cat who had found his place in the world. With a final glance at Leo, Mia sat down at the table, a content smile on her face. She knew that this was only the beginning of their journey together. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side, a team. And as she watched Leo curl up in his favorite spot, settling down for the night, Mia realized that she had rescued more than just a kitten. Leo had rescued her too.